Today on Unpacked.
My philosophy really was work, save, and travel. Literally just went into a mode of, I like this thing, I found my thing. I just told them that, I'm going away. Am I still going to have a job? Obviously, the answer was, we don't know.
You then eventually turned this love for travel into a business.
I know it's possible. I've met people who travel for a living. Surely I can figure something out.
Travel for many is completely inaccessible, but today's guest has figured out exactly how to do it, having gone to over 20 countries. He's here to share his story. Let's unpack. The travel bug bit Afrika Mdolomba when he received the opportunity to study further overseas after completing his undergraduate degree in South Africa. Meeting new people and exposure to travels in and around the continent he was in opened up a brand new world for the Eastern Cape-born media and journalism graduate. He has since traveled to many countries and made a business of his wanderlust. Afrika, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
What was your upbringing like and exposure to any kind of leaving the vicinity of where life was for you?
I think traveling for me started really when I was quite young. So back in the days, we'd go on like school trips or perhaps family trips with relatives or parents, etc. And I think that's when I really got to pack my bags for the first time and go on an actual holiday.
And where was your home base at the time?
I grew up in the Eastern Cape, born and bred, and a lot of holidaying for me would be around the Eastern Cape, and if you're lucky enough to go beyond the Eastern Cape.
So in terms of, you already mentioned the school part, many people don't actually even know the areas that they're from. So did you get an opportunity to explore the Eastern Cape and the surrounds, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, so as a child, I did get to, most especially with school trips, so we'd play sports in different parts of the Eastern Cape, so that exposed me to a lot of different places. And then when it comes to holiday, I also got to go to a whole lot more places. But I definitely do wish that I'd visited more places because really you can't see it all at once. Eh?
Yes. So in terms of family trips, maybe share with us what that experience was. The first one, just leaving the province, packing a bag to go somewhere completely new.
Wow. I think one of my earliest memories was probably coming to Gauteng for the first time with my parents. That was seeing Johannesburg for the first time, the big city lights. That was really quite a milestone for me. And I think that exposure really kind of gave me a whole lot in terms of to jump from and go beyond that.
Did you feel, as somebody who's not Gauteng-based, did it feel like your city of gold? Kind of like, because there's this perception of people that are from Gauteng that like when people arrive in Joburg, it's wide-eyed and excitement.
Absolutely. So, coming from the Eastern Cape, you hear all of these stories about Johannesburg, Gauteng, you watch television, and you have this massive, great idea about what the place looks like and what the streets are like. And eventually you come and you see it all for yourself, and it's a whole new world. As a child, you look around and you're seeing things for the first time, bump into a few celebrities here and there, and it's a really great experience.
So let's fast forward to school now is over. You still haven't reached the point where travel is intentional. It just happened to be you're going with school, or it was a family holiday. Where did you go to for your studies, and why was that the place that you chose?
So I think another very important trip in my life was in university. So we took a trip from Pretoria to Cape Town, a bunch of classmates and I, which was really amazing. And that really started a whole lot of things for me, because over there we got exposed to a whole lot more stuff. It was the first time for me in Cape Town. A lot of the people I was around were seeing the ocean for the first time, which is...
But you see, I'm a Gauteng person, I'd be like, isn't there an ocean in the Eastern Cape?
No, I'd seen the ocean. It was just my first time in Cape Town.
I hear you,
But it was interesting to see other people seeing the ocean for the first time and how they interacted with it. And yeah, it was really beautiful to observe that and watch that. And but I really think that trip was also the start, because things really got better in terms of curating and making trips really, really nice, and putting activities and having like an entire package to make the trip really memorable.
How different was it, traveling as a kid with your parents versus traveling as an adult with your friends?
Firstly, the freedom, of course. So you obviously get to do a whole lot more that you can't do with your parents, and you're much older now. So
yeah.
There's certain things that you might enjoy doing that you now can do with your friends, and just go out there and create those memories. And I think the biggest thing for me was just the difference in freedom, just the ability to do things that you ordinarily can't do with mommy and daddy around.
Yeah. So what was the next significant thing that happened in your life after that?
So after that, I was fortunate enough to be granted a scholarship to go study overseas in China. And over there, I met new friends, obviously a lot of Europeans, North Americans. And together we decided that over the June holiday, so our June holiday for them is around January, February. And we decided for 5 weeks we'd go backpacking in Southeast Asia.
So before we get to that part, I mean, I'm wondering, what was it that got you a bursary? Like, what was the bursary for?
All right, so I have a media journalism background. I studied that, and things weren't really looking great for me, I decided, how can I take my career to the next level? Decided to apply for the scholarship, which included obviously the media and learning the Mandarin language.
Okay.
So I went over there, learned the language, just upskilled myself. And the whole plan really was to come back to South Africa and combine the Mandarin speaking as well as my professional media background and put it all together. That was the initial plan.
One might be wondering, how much is actually available to a Mandarin speaker in that space in South Africa?
There's a lot of opportunities really for people who speak Mandarin. I've had a lot of really just odd opportunities just coming to me because of my ability to speak Mandarin. But from a professional perspective, you can really, from my media background, you could work for media, Chinese media based in South Africa. You could be working in sort of your communications, PR departments for Chinese firms, like the big cell phone company they have here in South Africa. So there's quite a lot of opportunities. And into travel space, I mean, China is one of the biggest source markets for international travelers for South Africa, and that really puts you at an advantage if you can communicate in their language.
So you get together with a whole bunch of other people that are exploring from different countries, and you decide you're gonna go backpacking, which there are some negative connotations to the thoughts to what backpacking is. Some people think it's like you literally have a backpack and you're sleeping in a camping site or under a bridge. What was your perception of it versus what you discovered along the way?
Yeah, so initially I'd heard about the whole backpacking, but fortunately I'd met 1 or 2 backpackers before I did the backpacking. So I kind of had an idea of what it was about, but there's obviously a whole lot of misconceptions. People think you sleeping in dingy dorm rooms. People think you sleeping on a bus, or I don't know, like there's all kinds of misconceptions. And just actually going and doing it was really amazing for me, because I got to break down all of those stereotypes and kind of just come out of my own shell and just escape the fears that I had about the backpacking and really enjoy it.
So in terms of the travel, where exactly did you go? And maybe share with us, because travel isn't so accessible to everybody, but we might think it's so expensive, and maybe it's not that expensive.
Absolutely. So during the academic year, we'd been planning to say, yo, guys, holidays are coming up. What do we want to do? Obviously, everybody in the squad wanted to travel because we're in Asia. Some of us might have been there only once, so we want to make the most of it. So we decided, okay, let's go traveling, and the cheapest way to travel, cheapest and most effective way, was backpacking at the time. And we got odd side jobs in China doing this, that, and the other.
What was your this, that, and the other?
So we did, so they have all kinds of speaking English, firstly, in China is an economy on its own.
Yes.
So if you can speak English, you can do a lot of things. So we do a voice-over recording. So for example, they have remote games, GPSs, and they need a voice-over for that.
Yes.
And those are the kind of things we do, teaching English as well as a side job. By the way, your visa doesn't allow you to do this, but...
You did it on the side.
Yeah, you
criminal, you.
So we did that, and that's how we're able to put money together and be able to afford the holiday. And once we'd all reached our set target budget for the trip, then it was time to execute.
The nice thing, of course, is that certain parts of Asia are almost like summer all year round. They don't actually have winter.
Absolutely. So here's a really interesting thing. So the cars over there, in South Africa and most parts of the world, you have your heater and your cooling in your car, the knob. Over there, they only have cooling because they don't need to heat the car. They have summer throughout the year, so they'll have rainy summer and dry summer, which is absolutely fantastic. It's really hot, really humid. But I mean, for somebody like me who prefers summer over the winter, I was basically in heaven there.
So tell us about the countries you went to, and then let's talk money.
All right, fantastic. So we sat down. We used to meet up as friends for dinner in the university cafeteria and plan and decide what we're going to do. And ultimately, we decided on visiting Cambodia as well as Vietnam, which are just south of China. And obviously put that plan into motion, booked our plane tickets, and landed in Cambodia for the first time. And mind you, before going to Asia, I probably didn't even know that Cambodia existed.
And that's the reality for many people.
Which is amazing. You know, it's the stuff dreams are made of. Going from not knowing what Cambodia is to actually going and exploring Cambodia was phenomenal for me. Got there and wow, what a journey. Meeting all kinds of people. So we were a group there were 5 of us coming from university. And over there, I got exposed to a whole lot more travelers because as you backpack, you're in dormitories with all kinds of other travelers. I got to meet solo travelers for the first time and really get to see what solo people are about and how they do this whole, I'm leaving my country by myself and traveling solo, which was really good for me because that was also the start of great things for me. So Cambodia is where we started. I think we were there for just over a week. The entire vacation was 5 weeks. So we did just over a week in Cambodia. They've got Angkor Wat Temple, which is the largest religious monument in the world. It's like an ancient, it's beautiful. We have to see it. And the history behind it is really rich. The Cambodian people have got rich culture as well, which was really beautiful. And thereafter, we took a bus into Vietnam. And I mean, these countries are right next to each other, but it's so different. So you go from one country to the next, and it's just completely different. And we spent 4 weeks in Vietnam, which was beautiful. Started in the south, Ho Chi Minh City, made our way all the way to the north in Hanoi over 4 weeks using all kinds of transport. We were on bicycles, we rented motorbikes for a day. We took buses, we were also on trains, so we really did travel in, almost all the possible ways through Vietnam.
So after you had done Cambodia and Vietnam, where you were now being a full-on traveler, did you look back at your Cape Town trip and say we were not traveling?
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you why I say that is because we have a culture in our country, and obviously it's not everybody, where you'll say, we're going to Durban, right? But it ends up just being like drinking, grooving moment. You don't actually see the place. Exactly. So what was so different about Cambodia, Vietnam trip versus, the local trips you were doing in SA?
It's interesting. I tell people that I'd traveled before Asia, and I only really started traveling after Asia because what I did before Asia is exactly what you're talking about. We go to Cape Town and the highlight is really Long Street. And, that's the trip. Every
day is Puza Thursday.
Yeah, hubbly bubbly and bulaboot. And that's that's the whole trip, really. Which is good. If that's what you like, that's good for you. Yes. But fortunately, I went now to Asia and got exposed to a whole new way of traveling, which involves activities, because activities and things to do is really
and things
important.
To see.
Yeah, of course. So just having a whole planned out trip an itinerary and just having a trip that makes sense. I think that would be the biggest difference in that we planned it out more and then added things to do, like just interesting things, just to know what is in the area, what's interesting to do and see in the area that you're in as you move along the journey. So I think that would have been the biggest difference for me.
So then Asia happens, you get exposed to travel because you are with travelers who want to sit and plan and say, let's explore here and there, let's go and see this or get to learn about this. When you came back to SA after your studies were done, what was the thing that made you say, I actually want to do this? Because you do get people who will go on a holiday, explore, and then it ends up being maybe once every 2 or 3 years, I'll do a week somewhere and try and squeeze in a whole lot of things.
Yeah, I think for me, it really just hit me, So when I did that first trip to Cambodia and Vietnam, it really struck me because I'd spend times outside of my circle that I'd traveled with, meeting other people and just talking to them, having these conversations with them. And the way that just narrate their stories was just phenomenal for me. And I thought, wow, I have to do this. And then coming back to South Africa, one of my first instincts was I need to go back. So I got to SA and my philosophy really was work, save, and travel. And that's how I got hooked. I mean, I'd been hooked, but I got even deeper, and that I just made it my life purpose, really, to just go and expose myself to more of this traveling thing because I'd enjoyed it so much.
How much did you have to save for your Cambodia Vietnam trip? And we are mindful of the fact that it was a few years ago, so obviously the numbers we're talking about are relative to the time that you traveled.
So I think for a period of about 5 months.
5 months or weeks?
Oh,
5 weeks?
Forgive me. I wish it was 5 months. For a period of about 5 weeks, I think I'd saved up roughly just over 20K. But that excluded plane tickets, so because we bought those separately and those fluctuate depending on the season and whatnot. So I think 20,000 Rand lasted me for the whole 5 week. Well, over 20,000 Rand, yeah, just to be safe.
Yes. Okay, so you back home and you've been bitten by the bug. What was happening with your work at the time? Because, you were going to study. Now you've got to come back and have some sort of income.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Just to add something about money, although I had in South African rands just over 20, when I got to Vietnam, I was a multi-millionaire. So
with their currency.
With their currency, of course. So you'd go to the ATM and withdraw 4 million dong and call home and be like, Mom, I've made it, So that was really beautiful for me. And then coming back to South Africa. Now you've done this thing of traveling and you want to do more of it. Literally just went into a mode of, I like this thing. I found my thing, really. So it's like falling in love, this is what I want to do. This is a person I want to be with. I'd done that, so I decided that, this is the life that I want to live and this is what I want to do. And I just sort of dedicated my life to doing more and more of that.
So back to your profession and what you were doing when you got back.
Right, so I got back, worked more in media, particularly in social media, digital media management. So managing social media accounts for a very large entertainment company here in South Africa. Did that, also managing websites, etc. But I mean, I'm qualified for it. I was good for it, creating content. So I used to go to a lot of events and, take Insta stories, Twitter stuff, and just posting live rollout from the events, which was really cool because that really exposed me to a lot of popular people in South Africa. I'd be interviewing the same people every week, basically. But there was more, I really wanted to do more. And I'm really fortunate. Because
you were sick and tired of the scene.
Yeah, it's nice going to work, but it's much nicer going to a work that you really you like, So that's what I wanted with my life. And I'd met people who were doing this, people who were traveling full time. So I knew it was possible. Although what I was doing is not what now I wanted to do, I made it a point to say, I know it's possible. I've met people who travel for a living. Surely I can figure something out.
So where was the next trip to? Because now you had done 3 countries. That's China, Cambodia, Vietnam.
Yeah, so back to living my life on work, save, travel philosophy, saved up South African rands this time. It was in foreign currency, so literally I had to sacrifice a lot in my life and just put money together. And this time I went on a 2-month backpacking trip. It was back to Southeast Asia. I think this time I visited Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines, which was, again, mind-blowing. And this time I did it solo.
Yes.
So I'd been exposed to solo backpackers, although I went backpacking for the first time with a group. I went back now with by myself because I felt, I'm ready for this life. I can do it, and I did it, which was phenomenal. So I had to kind of leave my job.
So you actually saved just to travel and then quit your job. You didn't really have a plan for when you came back.
It's crazy. So when I remember going to tell my manager at the time that, I'm leaving. So I remember going to say, I'm going away for 2 months. I need us to chat about what's going to happen when I come back. So I didn't really ask for permission. I just told them that, I'm going away. Am I still going to have a job? Obviously, the answer was, we don't know. If you quit, it's a risk. But it's a risk I was willing to take, and I took it. And it really paid off.
How much did you save for the 2 months away?
I think probably around about 40. Yeah, I think somewhere around 40K I needed to put away for that trip.
What was the highlight of doing it solo versus being with a group?
I think solo gives you a whole lot more flexibility, I'll tell you, like, when I got to Bali in Indonesia, for example, I checked into this backpackers hostel, and I literally paid for 4 nights and spent 1 night, and the next morning, so you go to the breakfast area, and there's just backpackers sitting, eating. And I grabbed my food, went to sit down with these guys and started chatting with them. And they told me that they were leaving the hostel, like, after the meal. They'd rented their own car. They're going to Mount Batur. Mount Batur was also on my list of places to go. And they mentioned that they'd rented a car, which is it's like backpackers don't typically do that. And I knew that would be advantageous for me to go with them. So in that moment, I literally decided that I'm leaving my stay. Although I've paid, I'm going to abandon that stay and go with them. And that's a decision that I made by myself, sitting in that moment. So you can't really do that when you travel with people. You have to consult. This one is a bit scared. Oh, no, you can't do it. But when you're by yourself, you decide, you get to an island or a place that you like. And perhaps I remember there's an island called Lanta in Thailand. My initial plan was to be there for 2 nights because it was a transit. I was going to the next country after that. I ended up spending 5 nights. Every night I was like, I'm leaving tomorrow, and the next day,
it didn't happen.
It's fun. I'm like, another night. I ended up spending 5 nights. And those are the kind of decisions that I make by myself, which are allowed by solo backpacking. So I think that was the biggest difference, in that you can now do and just move differently because you're by yourself and you just move according to what you want and how you feel without consulting anyone.
If we're being honest with one another, because, we get real on the show. You traveling solo, how realistic is that for a woman to be able to travel solo?
Firstly, I just want to say South Africa is probably the unsafest place anywhere around the world. So as soon as you leave SA, you're just an inch safer, particularly when you go to Southeast Asia. So over there's a whole lot more women solo backpackers. Asia, the level of safety in Asia is really, when I go to Asia, I feel like I'm elsewhere because compared to South Africa, the levels are just insane. You'll have ladies working from the club at 4 o'clock in the morning, and unbothered, nothing happens to them, and they make it safely. And you hardly hear of terrible stories about, the kinds of horrendous stuff we hear here in South Africa about. So I'd definitely say it's much safer to travel solo in Asia. A lot of people are doing it. I met a few African people as well, African ladies who are solo traveling. So yeah, I suppose.
And then what are those dynamics that you experience, particularly in certain Asian countries where many feel like racism might exist? For example, what is it like being a Black person, an African person, traveling to certain parts of Asia?
It's a really great experience. I hear race and everything. Race is, everywhere. In any corner of the world, there's race dynamics. There's the fact that you're black. You get to an airport, you treated differently, you pulled aside more. Certain races get first preference when it comes to certain other things. But in terms when it comes to direct racism, it's crazy, I've never experienced any of that in Asia. Certain people say they've experienced it in Europe, which, Europe, Asia, very different. But from my personal experience, I never experienced direct racism. I experienced more just curiosity, people coming up to you, particularly in China, because I spoke the language. We'd go to village places where they don't get to see a lot of other races, and they'd be just curious to see what's, who's this black guy, what's up, is your skin real, they want to touch and feel and whatnot. So I think that's in terms of race and race dynamics, it's in any part of the world, but I never really went and experienced direct racism where I was excluded from certain things or told, no, you can't do this, etc.
Where was the next batch of places that you traveled to? Because you clearly have, gone to the depths of exploring Asia. There are people who say, I've been to Asia, but literally they just went to China, for example.
Yeah.
You really went and explored. So which are the other places that you've visited?
So I went back to Asia again.
You clearly love the place, but there really is a lot to see, and
There's so much to do. And the thing is, once you get the hang of Asia and just the whole lifestyle and just being on the ground there, it's you sort of hear about more countries. So you'll be in one country and you'll hear about this and that country, and now you're interested in another country that wasn't previously on your list. So I think it just builds up until you just want to do perhaps as much as you can. Also did a few trips around the African continent, solo as well, which were really amazing as well, interacting with fellow African brothers and sisters, meeting other solo travelers, meeting people coming from other continents to the African continent, and just exchanging our backpacking experiences, finding out how they think the African continent is different to perhaps backpacking Latin America or Asia, etc. So I did back to Asia, did quite a few African countries as well.
Can you list the countries you traveled to in Asia, because you went back a couple of times?
China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Hong Kong, Philippines, Laos. I hope. And
some people don't even know there's a country called Laos.
Yeah, in fact, I'll tell you a crazy story about how I ended up in Laos. I was supposed to go on a backpacking trip to Sri Lanka.
Yes.
And I'd taken leave at work. Granted, I get to the airport, and at the airport, they tell me that I can't get on the plane because I was supposed to connect somewhere in India, and that airline had just been grounded or whatever. They were broke. They couldn't fly anymore. And so this airline in South Africa couldn't let me on because I would be stranded when I get there. And now I'm like, oh my God, I can't go anymore. But I knew about Laos. So instead of Sri Lanka, the next cheapest flight was to Laos. And at the airport, I booked a plane and ended up in Laos. So it was pretty much on the spot, spontaneous kind of thing.
And which was the highlight of all the Asian countries that you've been to? If you had to pick one that you I would go there again and again.
It's the Philippines.
Wow, why?
Philippines, amazing, spectacular. So they have 7,000 islands in the Philippines. You could spend years just traveling the Philippines.
Yeah.
There's so much that I saw, but I'm aware that there's so much more that I could still see. And I'd love to go back to experience some of the things that I've already, but also see more. I think it's really beautiful, as you see it in the photographs on the internet, it looks like that. You get there, it's beautiful, it's magnificent. I mean, I'm a beach kind of person. I prefer to be by the beach, palm trees, sand, and Philippines gives you that. It gives you more, but it literally gives you what I like most.
Okay, then you spoke about our beautiful continent. Which are the countries you managed to go to?
Mostly Southern Africa, so your Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, Namibia, and just basically all the surrounding, and even the ones that are landlocked like Lesotho. And also been to, I think, Tanzania, which was really pretty amazing. But there's still so much more that I'd like to do.
Yes.
I'd love to visit all African countries one day, eventually. But yeah, one country at a time.
Did your bosses eventually get sick of you taking leave to travel?
Yeah, I think eventually they would have seen that, this guy is taking so much leave. But I was really smart about the way that I took leave because I'd work a lot on weekends. And working on weekends meant I could take that time or they give me money for overtime. But I never really took money for overtime. I just prefer to take the time off and bank that and eventually have enough time and combine it with my own leave days.
Yeah.
And another pro tip for people is to combine your leave days with sort of public holidays, your extended long weekends, etc. So then you have more travel time and take less leave.
Highlight African country, which one would you say you definitely want to go back?
Wow. Namibia is amazing. Namibia is really, really, really great. So I did a solo trip to Namibia, obviously met a bunch of travelers there, but they've got this place in the middle of the desert called Deadflay, which has trees that have been standing for like 700 years, but they're still standing in the middle of the desert. And it's just feels like being on a movie set when you visit that place. And just the whole country in general is quite beautiful. So I think Namibia for now, but wow, it's actually quite hard to put one country in there because even Mozambique is beautiful, Zanzibar and Tanzania is quite beautiful as well. But I think Namibia would take the cup for now.
I think Namibia is actually one of the more underrated when it comes to talking about travel. People don't necessarily think of like, oh, I want to go on a holiday there unless you're quite familiar with what it has to offer. So in terms of you then eventually turned this love for travel into a business. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I was doing the whole work save process. I'd work like basically the whole year and get a short holiday at the end of the year. And eventually it wasn't really working out for me because I wanted to travel at a much higher pace than I was and just more frequently. And so eventually I sat down, I was like, how can I turn this into a business? I mean, I'd met people who were traveling, who were living off of traveling. So I absolutely knew it was possible. I just needed to figure out a way for me to do it. And before long, I had thought of a company to register here in South Africa. And I did do that. And now I run my own company and I take people on holidays. And that's how we've come 360 to me now, really achieving my dream in terms of getting paid to travel, to do what I love to do.
What are some of the misconceptions that you'd say we as South Africans have about traveling abroad?
Firstly, it's the price. Everybody thinks it's really expensive, it's out of this world. It's hard to get to. I think that's the biggest misconception. But I also think people, when it comes to picking destinations to travel to, people are not really informed as to what can I afford. Everybody wants to go to Dubai, but can you afford to go to Dubai and have a good time with your budget in Dubai? So I think that's another thing that South Africans need to work on is travel to places that you can afford to travel to and where your money can really help you have a good time. I think that could be one of the biggest stumbling blocks.
Do you think also bulaboot is a stumbling block?
Yeah,
Bulaboot mentality.
Absolutely. Our people and, nice times. I think that can also really hamper and just make your progress in terms of reaching all your travel goals. And take you a bit longer. But I think it's one of the contributing factors.
You mentioned that you had to make sacrifices, obviously, to be able to do the work travel cycle. What were some of those sacrifices that you made?
The bulaboot.
I don't know why it's so funny when you say it.
doing way less of that.
Yes.
And, just moving around more consciously in life, instead of going to, fancy restaurants, etc., just be unavailable for things like that because you have a goal. So I think that's the mentality that I kind of adopted, where if I'd be invited to a place where I knew I'd be spending more than I want to spend, I'd, just generously decline. And I think I just live my life a bit more cautiously and putting my money away, knowing that there's a bigger goal for me.
What would you say the biggest lesson is that you've taken out of this part of you of traveling, or the biggest lesson you've learned about yourself with the travel?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is just knowing that I'm disciplined enough and capable of doing things that I want to do, because I think that's the crux of it, really. You need to really be disciplined in order to do a lot of things and to be consistent as well. So just knowing that within me, I have it, and also just have the ability to make things happen for myself. So instead of sort of hoping and wishing and putting candles out there, I actually go out there and just make it happen for myself. So I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from it all.
20 countries later, what would you like to leave our viewers with?
I think traveling is really possible. If you have spare income, if you have that little bit of money to enjoy yourself here and there, you can possibly put some of that money away and definitely travel. You know, traveling is not exclusive for certain people, and especially activities. So you'll travel to a place and do certain activities, and people will say, we're now radadilo tsabo, you know. It's not about that. Anybody should be doing these activities. It's not reserved for certain people in society. All of us should be aspiring to do these things, and we should be taking steps to really do these fun things. Make sure our holidays are nice, because holidays are supposed to be nice.
Yeah. Afrika, thank you so much for chatting to us. You have reignited the travel bug within me. I mean, as you're speaking about Asia and obviously exploring the rest of our continent, I'm sure your travel wish list is super, super long, and I hope you get to it safely and that your business continues to grow and that you're able to help more and more people do exactly what it is that you love to do.
Thank you very much. I hope more people travel, and let's explore the world.
Explore the world indeed. And if amounts like 20,000 rands for an international trip sound expensive, don't forget that South Africa really is absolutely beautiful. There's so much to see, so much to explore in your very own province. So maybe just hafula the bulaboot and open up to going to see what is around us to see and discover. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good night. Next time on Unpacked.
These guys would keep me for the evening and rape me. And I had my first sip of wine, and it was love at first sight. I was always the guy arriving with a case of beers. I sat on my couch when I was in my 30s with my gun in my mouth, asking God to give me the courage to kill myself. It's a wonderful gift that I have. I know I'm an alcoholic.
Thank you so much for watching Unpacked with Relebogile Mabotja. Make sure you subscribe to my channel where you can get to watch more episodes. But more importantly, you can be part of our online community. Comment down below, share with us who you'd like to see on the show, or what story you'd like us to discuss. We love engaging with you. Keep it coming, and don't forget to subscribe.